Grand Dawning, Cleveland, Ohio, and the rest of the planet. Welcome to another edition of 360 Info Network right here on AM 1490 WERE. We are so happy to be here with you. Let's see. Okay. We're gonna push through a couple of technical difficulties right here. It looks as though the broadcast is having some complications on StreamYard, and we're going to work through these. Hopefully, we are still on the air as we speak right now. Um, let's get this together, folks, real quickly.
The wind is real high.
It really is.
Okay, it says that the stream was deleted on Facebook. It could be that we are actually live on YouTube, and I believe we are. So we're going to continue on YouTube and welcome everyone to this special broadcast. We decided to do pretty much a forum with these distinguished artists that we have on our panel. And we have with us Deidre McPherson, Gwendolyn Garth, Gina Washington, and we're going to be joined by a couple of artists momentarily. So as we continue through these, difficulties, we'll get everything together. Really glad to have everyone on today, and just want to welcome you to the 360 Info Network broadcast. We are on every Saturday. We broadcast live to Facebook and YouTube, and we also broadcast live to AM 1490 WERE. So we are on the air now. You can actually participate in our broadcast by tuning in on Facebook and YouTube, and you'll be able to make comments, and we may be able to actually squeeze some folks in towards the end of this broadcast. We expect to be on it for at least an hour, and depending on how the conversation goes, we'll be on even longer than that. So with that, I would like to welcome to our airwaves these very distinguished artists that we have on our panel with us today. Of course, you can see Gina Washington up there in the top right corner. We have Ms. Gwendolyn Garth, and we have Deidre McPherson. All of them in this city as artists are institutions, including Deidre McPherson, who we just established is a photographer. Her first love is actually music, and she's been a musician for part of her life. I think, if my memory serves me correctly, you played violin or something like that, Deirdre?
Yep. Classically trained violinist, and I love to play, more popular music, things like that by ear. Sometimes I try to be in a band, but
Okay. All right. Also with us, we have Miss Gwendolyn Garth, and you may or may not know that Gwendolyn is a former member of the board of Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. She has extensive knowledge of the arts and culture scene here in Cleveland as a result of that. So we're going to ask her a few questions about her time at CAC and what's going on with CAC now from her perspective. Also, we have Gina Washington, who is an artist and educator. She's a visual artist. She's also a musician. She is someone who teaches at Rainey Institute, and she does a lot of other things. I was looking at her bio yesterday, and it seems as though she may have established a gallery, and she's been involved in some other things that we will get into as well. So all of you, welcome to 360 Info Network.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank
for
you.
having us.
All right, so we're going to start with the Dean of Artists on our panel, and that is Miss Gwendolyn Garth. I'm really interested, Gwen, in your perception of the Cleveland art scene in light of the fact that we've seen a lot of change within the past 10 years. And, I'll preemptively say that part of the reason that we are together today is because of your position on the CAC board and some things that happened while you were on the CAC board. There were these things called Creative Workforce Fellowship grants. There were 161 of them that were passed out during a 10-year period, and we found that only 9% of those dollars went to Black artists. So there was a very small number of artists that received grants through that program. They were unrestricted grants, ranging from $15,000 to $20,000. There are some folks who even got grants twice. So this is what that program looked like, and then it became public knowledge at some point that there were some disparities in the funding that was going out, and as a result of that, CAC responded. They established something called the Support for Artists Planning Team, and Gwen served on that team as well as I did. And so we worked through establishing what the needs of artists were. And as a result of that, there were some changes by CAC. They came out with a different funding model for individual artists. Of course, not all of that money goes to individual artists. As a matter of fact, only a very small portion of it goes to the artists. And then the majority of the funds go to nonprofit cultural institutions. So we have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we have the Cleveland Museum of Art, we have the Cleveland Orchestra, we have MoCA. They get a large portion of those dollars. And then there are, I think, somewhere around 59 nonprofit organizations that also receive some of that funding. So the funding was created by something called a cigarette tax. And with that cigarette tax, the funds came in and then they were passed out through CAC to CPAC. That landscape has changed. And what used to be CPAC is now the Assembly for the Arts. So we're really happy to have Deidre here because she can provide some perspective on what the Assembly for the Arts is doing as this whole landscape has changed. So with all of that, I've teed it up for you, Gwen. Talk to us about what you've seen that has changed, what the landscape looks like now that we've evolved to the place that we are right now.
Oh, hello everybody. And where you get that name Dean from? That title. Right. Thank you. I got involved with my natural curiosity. That creative workforce fellowship is really what opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. Trying to get one was a trip. I tried 2 times and got zero, and so I was like, so what the heck is this? I mean, how do we make some headway? So I went to my county councilman, and at that time he was we were looking at voting for the second tax, and he wanted me to use my network of Black artists to get involved to vote for the tax. But I told him that I wasn't going to do that because I had found out that we weren't getting anything. We weren't getting any of the money. So by my involvement, I learned a whole lot about the political system and how it works. And it's a thing that you can't stop pushing. It's something that we're going to have to continue to work at. I my hope now is that we get an artist on that board, somebody who works in the arts on that board, which is set up for that. But there are no working artists on the board, and I think that's what we really need, that voice in there. The drawback on that is whoever's on that board will be ineligible for any funds from places that receive money from CAC. I knew that when I got on the board, but I made that sacrifice because learning is money to me. And I really learned a lot. So,
Yeah.
that is really my hope. And I'm encouraging someone who can afford to get on the board, an artist out there, and I want us to pay more attention to not only the money involvement, but the politics behind it.
So Gwen, I want to ask you, you were serving on the board. As a result of being on the board, you weren't eligible for any kind of grants, but you stepped down. And so since you've made that decision, how has it affected your artist career?
How has it affected my what?
Your artist career. How have things evolved since you stepped down?
It put me in a pretty good position. A lot of people were inviting me to participate, and I didn't have to apply for quite like I was before. But I've become involved in some other political things, like being on the board of Case Western Reserve Neighborhood Advisory Committee.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on that board, and I've been on a few other boards that I'm now on the Senior Transportation Connection. Um, it has opened me up to the political arena as an activist. I found out yesterday that's one of the reasons I was appointed to the board or asked to be on the Senior Transportation Connection because of my um, involvement as an activist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Mhm.
All right. I'm gonna move on to Gina. Gina, you are someone who has had a relationship with Rainey Institute.
Mm-hmm.
Rainey Institute is one of the institutions that has received operating capital or operating funds from CAC. Can you talk about how you've seen things evolve since the time that we went through this issue of the artist grants being disparately towards others as opposed to being to Black artists, and just basically the overall
Mm-hmm.
idea of operating with the funds from CAC and the fact that those funds are dwindling and how those things affect an institution like Rainey.
Well, it's interesting because Rainy has been around for over 100 years. So I think, to be honest with you, not much affects financially. I know they would say something completely different. Um, Rainy Institute, because they have longevity, they have a system that's in place. They have I don't know how long Jennifer Harris has been the executive director, but it's been over like 5 years. So they have people on board. That are just continuing the train down the track, so to speak. So I think Rainy has everything in place, and a lot of people use Rainy Institute or would like to use Rainy Institute as like a model for growth. Back in the day when I started at Rainy, it was one person, Zandra Richardson, who was doing everything. She was literally, in front of the house, the back of the house. She was doing everything by herself, and it was in a house. It was literally in a house. That was because it was a settlement house, so anybody coming to America learned how to be American at Rainy Institute. And then when the community changed, the institution's initiatives changed. So I think, to be honest, Rainy is always going to be in a good place because they have proven that longevity and that proven that quality of what they do. Ultimately, so they get they get a lot of funding, and I didn't see what they got from CAC this time around, but I know it was pretty hefty, and they're constantly growing. They have two locations. They're at Pivot on the west side. They're in different schools throughout the week. They still have their new building location, Huff, of course, that is constantly evolving, and the staff is growing. So I think just in our visual art department, we have like 7 different people just in visual arts who work throughout the course of the week and whatnot, even on the weekend. And what I'm fortunate to experience is that staff is multicolors. You know what I mean? It's diverse. And I know, Gwen's initiative and what she did with the CAC, you know, opened up a can of, I guess, exposed a lot of things that were happening in Cleveland in and of itself. COVID again exposed more of things that were happening to Black and Brown people in Cleveland. And I guess we could say thank you, COVID. I don't, um, to what, you know what I mean? Because it just brought things to the forefront of how the system has us in the system. And, a lot of initiatives came out of that. The Cleveland Foundation had their Black Futures Fund. Zygo Press has their BIPOC residencies. all these little different initiatives to specifically target Black and brown people um, now exist. But on one hand, you say to yourself, is that just another way for all these funds to just go through, the administrative possibilities and trickle down to the Black and brown, artists who get a small portion of these grants? And, so I think there's a lot that still needs to be worked on when it comes to how artists like ourselves get funding, and how that funding can become sustainable, and not just I don't know, like $1,000 to do a residency is not enough money for anybody. So, no matter for what short of time, if you're going to actually create something new. Um, so I think a lot of that has to change. And I think those type of, how they look at how they pay us, and how we can, what was the talk for Assembly for the Arts? Guaranteed income. We set in a lot of conversations about guaranteed income for artists. What would that look like?
Yeah.
So I think with all that, there's certain institutions that I work with. I work also with Art House. I work with Broadway School of Music. I work with Cleveland Print Room. And all of those institutions are way smaller than Rainy. I don't know Rainy's budget. I can look it up, but I don't know what their budget is yearly. But a lot of people are trying to get to that level where their umbrella is pretty tight, and a little trickling rain doesn't get on everything and destroy the system. So a lot of people are working on making those changes to how their organization is run, so they can be as, I don't, what's the word, as successful as Rainy Institute is. I think, if that answers your question. It's a
Well,
lot to look at.
the other part of the question is
Mm-hmm.
how you have managed as an individual artist through this evolutionary period.
Well, I'm still managing. And with that said, I think I'm in a precarious position because of a lot of things. I think a lot of and I'm an anomaly outside of most artists. A lot of things are happening now for emerging artists, and a lot of things are happening for and I would say that to say that a lot of the idea of emerging artists are what, just fresh out of college to whatever age, and I'm nowhere near that. um I can be looked at as administrative. I can be looked at as, a working artist. I can look at as an educator. So for me personally, I don't think, I how you say, can be looked at as anything that's normal in the system, because I constantly have to work. I constantly have to hustle to get jobs, so to speak. And I don't technically have an art making practice because I'm always in the hustle and flow to actually get the job to make money to make a living. And that's difficult because a lot of times these granting institutions and whatnot go, they want, well, let's go see your studio. Let's look at your practice, whatever. And, you can see what's behind me. This is like not technically a studio. It's my, office, bedroom, whatever you want to call it. So, it's what I can do, when I can do it, and how I can do it. And that's just the reality of the situation. Like I said, I'm in a precarious position. You know, I don't know if it's my age. I don't know if it's my education. I don't know what it is that makes what I have to do more work. I think so. It hasn't been like all the doors open, because I'm still, if I don't have a full-time gig, and I'm thankful for that because I like to be flexible, and I've had to be flexible, especially when I was taking care of my grandfather who had a stroke and died at the age of 99 in his house. If I was not, if I were working in a full-time job, that would have been extremely difficult. So being an artist and being able to create when you can, teach when you can, and all that kind of stuff, and be flexible in that way, made that possible. But anything at this stage of the game. I'd like a little bit more consistency. I like a little bit more recognition. I think I'd like a little bit more consistency. It's just, and stability when it comes to, I'd like to be able to make art and make a living from making art and not have to hustle 10 or 15 different things within a month, if that makes any sense.
Well, what you described is the scenario that many artists are in because they're in different worlds at the same time.
Right.
We've been joined by Robin Robinson, who is the executive director of Sankofa Fine Art Plus, and she's also an artist. And I would have to imagine that some of the things that you just enunciated are things that she's dealing with as well. Robin, can you talk about navigating the art landscape as an artist and as an art administrator?
Good morning. I definitely agree with Gina. Trying to be an administrator and be an artist at the same time is, it's pulling on two different parts of the brain simultaneously. And, it's exhausting. So, to have to carry both of those weights. I mean, the creative side of me wants to paint and create, and, when given the opportunity to do so, I just have to put the administrative side aside because they cannot live in the same space. So, it does take, a schizophrenic type of mindset to do both.
Okay.
As far as Sankofa is concerned, I would absolutely, I have a wonderful board. So we have created a space where I can delegate a lot of things to people, which helps. It helps tremendously. As an artist myself, I want to do more. I want to do more as an artist, and to be able to delegate, because for the longest time it was just me. I mean, I'm the executive director. It was all me. And for the past year, 2023, we have created a board that I can now, kind of ask, can you take care of this? Can you take care of that? And therefore, I can do more of my own art, which I'm thankful for.
Okay. Want to bring our good friend Deidre McPherson into the conversation. She is the Chief Community Officer at Assembly for the Arts. And Assembly, I'll be transparent. I'm on the board of the Assembly. I'm not her boss, but I get to have conversations with her about the things that are going on. There has been a lot of movement in the 2 years that Assembly has been active. And for those who don't know, I talked about at the top of the show about how the community for CPAC is what it used to be called, and then it went through Arts Cleveland, and then it became Assembly for the Arts. It has basically taken a leading role in advocating for individual artists in the city, but also in addressing the needs of the artist community, be it the major nonprofits, the smaller nonprofits, or the individual artists. And from what we're seeing with the Assembly, it is definitely a solution-oriented, solution-based organization that is looking to make an impact on the art and culture scene. So I don't want to paint a broad brush and say that everything is negative when it comes to what artists are going through in the city. And I thought it was important to involve you in this conversation so that you can talk about some of the things that Assembly is doing to make it a better place for artists. So can we talk about some of the solutions that the Assembly for the Arts is advocating right now?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on. You mentioned I'm the Chief Community Officer at Assembly. I just want to explain my background a little bit. that I came into the art scene as, well, my first love is music, and that's what really made me interested in arts and culture, the power of arts and culture to bring different people and communities together. And I've always been very entrepreneurial. So while I studied music in college, I also studied business, marketing. And I kind of stumbled into the field and fell in love with it. Arts administration wasn't really a career phase that was available as a full-time major when I was coming up. And it's really the behind the scenes. It's the business side of the arts. It's the organizing. It's the advocacy. It's equity work. It's many things. And so it's been, I've been at Assembly for the Arts for about a year now. I just celebrated a 1-year anniversary, and I really have a lot of respect for each of the panelists on this call because of your hustle as an artist and because of your advocacy. Assembly for the Arts, we are focused on helping Cleveland to be a great city of the arts and a great city of equity. What role does arts and culture play and the creative economy play in helping Cleveland to be a great city of equity? And there have been many challenges for Black and Brown artists and creatives, especially in the arts and cultural field. And so that's one of the reasons why I feel very privileged to work in a space where I can be, part of an organization that's helping to work toward the changes we want to see. And so, working with, artists like Gwen, who are really interested in the political side, and made the sacrifice to get involved is much respect to Gwen, Robin, and Gina. I often see you in these spaces too, where we're advocating for helping the industry be better for Black and Brown artists, and therefore better for everyone. So just wanted to make that shout out. One of the key projects I work on at Assembly is the support for artists funding. And so it's gone through some tremendous changes, as Gwen mentioned, from once upon a time before Assembly came into being 2 years ago, when it was CPAC. There was this, tremendous award, $20,000 that was being awarded to artists in an unrestricted fashion, meaning they could use it for however they felt would best benefit their artistic practice, which was incredible. And then finding out that there were some inequities and things that needed to change with that. So Gwen, thank you. And the many others who played a role in reviewing that and standing up for that and making sure that inequity was addressed. So fast forward to present day, where we are now, my team and I at Assembly, we are working with a number of partner organizations to revamp funding programs for artists yet again. So this has been a work in progress, and many, many changes have occurred in recent years, and in a way that I can completely understand artists feeling impatient. And because we have to get to a place where, just like in the field of finance, you got to have diverse revenue streams. We have to have diversity in what is funding arts and culture. We cannot be reliant on a cigarette tax. And so while we're in a position where we need to get this levy passed and renew the cigarette tax, we also need to be looking at other forms of public funding, whether it's from foundations or corporations or sponsorships, to fund the arts industry. And when that's really what's going to lead to it being less of a hustle for artists. If there's more money for artists to simply be artists and determine how best to get that funding. So we're in a growth phase, I want to say, right now. And so Assembly for the Arts, we've been re-granted funds, $500,000 from Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, CAC, to administer grant programs for artists. And we're doing that by continuing to grant dollars to some partner organizations. Those organizations are Caramoo House, Spaces, Julia de Burgos Arts and Cultural Center, and Cleveland Public Theater. They'll be continuing grant programs that they've done in the past. But what we learned from a very extensive support for artists listening campaign that we completed in the fall, what we learned from that is the dollar amounts for the funding programs need to increase. The problem or the challenge with that is that our cigarette tax is declining. So it's difficult to increase the size of the awards without giving out fewer awards. So that's why this year is going to feel like another transition period, and it's going to continue to be a transition until we can get to that ultimate goal of having over $2 million or at least $1 million to fund individual artists in this city. Right now, we're only at $500,000, and that's because we're working with the declining revenue source, cigarette tax, and we need a much more than that so that artists can truly thrive in Cleveland. And so it's like I want tomorrow today. Trust me. And many of us do, and we deserve that because this is a thriving field. It, is a huge industry, and it's very vital to our quality of life. But how do we truly get there? It's going to take time, and we're working with many allies and advocates across the region, including everybody on this call, to really make it happen.
You unpacked a couple of things. One, you talked about the fact that the size of those grants shrank. So at one time you're $15,000 to $20,000, and then now they're $2,500, $5,000 at the most.
They've been $4,000 to $6,000. And what we learned from the Support for Artists funding campaign is it needs to be more. So you will see a Support for Artists grant that is unrestricted, that is coming from Assembly for the Arts, that's $10,000 this year. So it's still not 20,000, but it's not 5,000. And then our granting partners, you'll see changes in their programs too. Again, that's directly informed by what we learned from the Support for Artists campaign. So we're not there yet. It's not 20, but we have to find more revenue sources to cover this and make it possible. And we're not there yet, but we're going to be doing research and continuing that to get there. Okay. It's going to take that time though.
So folks, you heard it first here on AM 1490 BRE 360 Info Network. We're looking at perhaps some increases in the size of the grant. And philosophically, we understand, you could perhaps reach a larger number of artists by shrinking the size of the grants. But the other thing that you spoke about was the fact that the revenues are dwindling and that we need to find some other sources of revenue to support individual artists. Can you talk about what some of those possibilities might be?
Well, an obvious one that might come to mind is marijuana. How impactful would it be if we were able to tax what is now legal, marijuana? And so, that's one. When we look at what's happening in some other cities, there's research that we're doing to learn from other cities. So, for example, some cities have like a hotel tax or a convention tax or a tax on billboards. And then a percentage of that, tax goes to fund arts in those cities. And so some of that has been researched, like that led us to get to a tobacco tax. There's a lot that happens at the state level that our president and CEO, Jeremy Johnson, leads all those initiatives in Columbus. There's conversations around, what has happened in the past, what's happening in other cities, and what could we potentially introduce here in Cuyahoga County.
Okay. Well, it's really interesting when you talk about the possibility of taxing marijuana. The voters approved the legalization of it, and then immediately afterwards, folks in Columbus, and I'm speaking of Republicans in the State House, decided that they wanted to create some additional laws to create restrictions and perhaps impact the revenues that could come from the taxation. So it's like, now you got a solution and you're shooting yourself in the foot. Let's just hope that at some point they come to their senses and realize the impact of the decisions that they're making, perhaps look at things a different way and look at ways to provide meaningful compensation to artists. earlier in the conversation, I think Gina mentioned this idea of basic income for artists, which seems like a good idea in some ways. I think that it is necessary for there to be subsidies, I would say, to artists. So if you look at the past couple of years, we had the CARES Act, and then we had ARPA came around, and they said, well, we're going to come up with some money to give artists. But when you look at typically how money comes to artists, there's no real direct support that comes from artists from the county or the city or the state. And so I'm just thinking out loud in this moment that perhaps there should be some kind of way that we can create some type of legislation that will provide funding for artists so that people are really, and I'm speaking in terms of creative businesses, I'm speaking in terms of nonprofit organizations that pay artists in certain ways, but don't compensate them fairly. I'll give you an example. As a musician playing in nightclubs in Cleveland, you could, and I'm just going to put names out, folks. You could go to a place like Brothers, who I've seen online, would pay a group of 5 people $100 for 3 hours of performance. That is criminal. It's criminal that a venue would expect artists to do all the promotion, marketing, and advertising to bring people to their establishment so that they can eat food and drink drinks and experience massive profits just because the band brought their following to their particular establishment. Something about that is wrong because the bar owners are exploiting the musicians in that scenario, and they shouldn't have to do all of that, you know? So I think that there should be some kind of way to subsidize artists. So perhaps the onus is not necessarily on the bar owner to compensate that musician fairly. It should be, but for whatever reasons, I mean, you know, they're in business to make money, and so they want to maximize their profits, but they can't entertain folks without us. You know, you can play records, you can hire a DJ, and that's a whole other scenario right there, because, you know, folks like to hear it exactly the way they heard it on the record. But when that music is performed live, I don't know, maybe it's just me. It just has a different impact because you're involved in something that's being created in that moment. You know, I'm speaking as a musician.
Can I add something there?
Yes.
I just wanted to share, last year at Assembly for the Arts, we did host a conversation around guaranteed income for artists. It's something that is being piloted in cities like Minneapolis and New York and in parts of California. So we invited some of the research folks behind those projects to join us virtually for a discussion. It felt very inspiring and very important to talk about for the reasons you just mentioned. You know, artists are of all, you know, all disciplines tend to be undervalued. And just like as we're starting to see a trend in the restaurant industry where there's a guaranteed wage for all staff, and you might pay a little bit more money for a plate of food because all the staff at that restaurant are being paid a livable wage, which I love and respect so much, because if you choose to work in an industry, you should be compensated at least a livable wage in addition to what the value that you're bringing. And so this conversation is so important. So, you know, I'd love to see that be added to a priority list as we build, you know, the amount of funding available for artists and transform that landscape for that guaranteed income conversation to be piloted and, you know, looked at here in Cleveland more seriously.
Yes. So, you know, one of the things that we've identified is the fact that a city like Cleveland cannot provide direct support to individual artists. I have been to ward meetings in different wards in the city of Cleveland, and I know that typically during these meetings, the first half hour or so is a conversation about public safety, and people are complaining about things that are happening in their neighborhoods, and they want a response from the police and so forth, so on. So as a result of that, a large portion of the city's budget, I think 53% of it actually goes towards public safety. So these folks who are coming in and making arrests and restoring the peace and all of that, they get direct compensation from the city because that's the way things have been created. I have long been saying, at least for the past 3 or 4 years, that um, artists play a similar role in our communities because we have an ability to affect behavior so that the police don't have to be called to deal with situations that have been caused by someone's trauma. Our
Um,
co-host on the show, Ham
yes.
Tony, is a police officer, and so he's navigating this particular landscape. And he's also an artist, so he's kind of got his feet in both pools, so to speak, as a musician and as someone who has been in the theater and film and so forth and so on. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, Brother Hamtonio, if you see the necessity for a paradigm shift for all these funds going to pay police officers versus the possibility of funds going to support the work and lives of artists in our community.
Well, again, welcome to everybody. Yeah, I'm Ham Tony. I'm co-host and creator of this particular platform. Uh, Shout out to all of you guys. Uh, Actually, again, Vince talked about some of the other programs that I'm a part of, and we're going to be reaching out to maybe some of you guys as well, where I put a coalition together to work with some of the historical, uh, programs that we have throughout the year, like Kwanzaa, Juneteenth, and things of that nature. So I reached out to several other stakeholders of the community and to form a coalition to try to get some of the dollars to promote some more culture and arts. But this conversation, is one that we have had before and probably need to, even in the future. And I like to deal with the root and deal with the basics of this problem because of our disunity and most of the things we tend to be about in our communities. There's no cultural unity. We always looking out for funds and seems to be on the short end of the stick of getting any of the funds that's necessary to promote programs in our community. First, this is a statement I wanted speak on first when hear you guys talking. Miss Gar Gwen, she's, I think, is in the area of looking at it from the political side of view. I think more attention should be given towards organizing groups of people to actually lobby and advocate for that. Amen. I think those voices need to be heard more so because it's to the point now. It's 2024 and we still screaming for our equal share of whatever it is we're trying to do, and we know that arts does deter behavior in the community, and something that we can get our kids to really partake in and to deal with the safety issues and a community village type of feeling in our in our neighborhood. So that's all important, and that's something we should be definitely advocating for. So I think we should uh, get into the political realm more so of advocating and let our voices be heard in reference to that. Now, you asked me a question again about the far as the budget or something, Vince, and police. What was the question in reference to that?
Well, basically, I was just making a reference to the fact that the predominance of the Cleveland municipal budget goes towards public safety, and
Uh,
I think it's important for us to look at other ways that we can apportion funds to be directed towards art and culture. Right
yeah.
now we're just dealing with an allocation that has been made that we're not going to talk about today, but
Mhm.
there has been an allocation made towards art and culture in Cleveland that is really unprecedented when you look at it, and there will be information about that coming out relatively soon. But in large measure, uh, there's no direct support for artists in this city, and I think that
Mhm.
there's something about that that needs to change. The other
Well,
thing
let me say
I
that.
want
Mhm.
go
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Mhm. Yeah, I was gonna say in there. I think the one sister really kind of was spot on in reference to that. If that's an issue, and then it seems like a debate that we're going to constantly have with trying to allocate funds or deal with the budget of safety and things like that. Get these big corporations involved. the Cleveland clinics of the world and things like that. The one sister talked about, other cities is tapping in other streams, in order to get that funding. So if we have a political group that is advocating for it and putting these folks on the front line of saying, hey, this is necessary, and this is, would help with the deterrent of crime, safety, and bringing, almost like a rites of passage with our young folks and bringing them to adulthood and dealing with safety. They need to step up and contribute to a revolving fund that we can tap into.
I agree with that. The other thing I wanted to mention, and it's something that Deidre mentioned in her comments, was just this whole idea of dividing the pie. But we find ourselves in a really precarious situation right now in that uh, we're looking at the possibility of renewing the tax levy for the cigarette tax. And we're also looking at the fact that most of the funds that go for advertising that campaign will come from the major institutions that are benefiting from the CAC funding. So at the same time, we're saying that we want the pie to be redivided. And my position on this is that those major institutions that get a preponderance of the funding also have additional revenue sources. So it's not going to impact them as greatly as it does the smaller nonprofits, and even more significantly, the individual artists. So definitely some work needs to be done to kind of create more equity within this realm. At this point, I think the individual artists might get something like 2% of the appropriations for art and culture that come through CAC. And that's something that definitely needs to change. The other thing that I wanted to point out, Brother Hamtonio, you mentioned the political aspect of it, and you talked about lobbying. I just want to make it known that the Assembly for Action is actually part of that lobbying mechanism, and they are down in Columbus, and they are advocating on behalf of individual artists and nonprofits. Deidre, did you want to shed any additional light on that?
I'll just clarify that Assembly for Action is the political action committee, the PAC for Assembly for the Arts. And so Jeremy Johnson, our CEO, leads both organizations. We have Fred Bidwell. He's the board president for Assembly for Action. And you're right. They're working really hard to advocate for the arts and increasing the amount of funding and availability of funding, renewing the levy first and foremost, having those conversations at the Capitol in Columbus, and they're working with a lobbyist. It's really hard to advance this work without someone who's a lobbyist to work for you and lead those conversations and help strategize behind the scenes. Because I'll just say that part. So
yeah. And two, I just really want to be clear about the intention of the Assembly for the Arts when it comes to individual artists. The Assembly for the Arts is playing a major role in advocating for artists in this community. Just know that. A lot of people aren't aware of the work that is being done, but we have to continue these conversations just so that people know that these things are not being swept under the rug, that there are people who have good intentions and they want to change things. We've been in a place where we've seen what things have looked like in the past. We've become aware of things that need to change, and we're making steps towards making the changes that are necessary. I want to go back to Robin for a few moments and just talk to her about the impact that she's seen within her practice. I know that there are several murals up in Glenville, but I also realize that from your perspective, it's more than just about public art. It's about art that reaches people on a community level. Can you talk about what Sankofa Fine Art Plus is doing to connect people in the community with art and the role that art plays in healing for us? Your microphone is muted, Robin.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Now, I was just saying that in addition to being the executive director of a not-for-profit arts organization that's been around for 25 years, I'm also a professional artist myself and an art therapist. So I bring that art therapy into my practice constantly in everything that I do. So Sankofa, for the last 10 years at least, has made it our mission to bring the community into our art organization and everything that we do. And what Vince, you did mention, the murals that are community engaged. So literally community engaged. We go out into the community. All we know is that we have a wall. We go out into that community, get a core group of people that want to talk about what their interests are. We go to meetings in that community and so forth, and find out what their actual interests are and what what they want to see um, explained on that wall. Giant billboard of their concerns. So not only is it their concerns that we end up making visual, but also they take part in painting that wall and so forth. So they have ownership of that piece. In addition to the murals, though, we also do different programming, and we just I'm sorry, I thought I heard something. We just wrote a grant for a safety program that will also give an income to a lot of the community members by screen printing and actually producing a product that they can then sell. So we, try to be as involved in the community and therefore try to address the violence in the community, because in my opinion, a lot of the violence comes from boredom and the fact that they don't see any product or income or progress coming out of the things that they do or the things that they personally may be interested in. So with this printing process or program, we're trying to address, because we are established right across the street from Glenville High School, so there's no reason why we can't actually address the issues of the children or students that go to Glenville High School. So that is something that, Sankofa is in 2024 trying to establish.
Yeah, well, what you've pointed out is something that is gaining, I guess, notoriety. The fact that we need to engage our young people, and the fact that, as you said, they're bored, they don't have anything to do. So as a result, they end up doing things that are going to get them unwanted attention. So
Right.
this is just one of the ways that the community can support the health of our children, and that is by keeping them engaged in things of an artistic or a cultural nature. We talk about the fact that we don't have art in all of the schools in the city. And there's
Hmm.
something inherently wrong with that. I mean, Robin, you grew up in Philadelphia. I think Gwen, you grew up here in Cleveland. Deidre, I don't think you're a transplant. You came from another place, but in these different cities, in the past, you did have art in the school.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
you had an opportunity, if you wanted to play an instrument, to maybe pick that up, or you might be able to draw or paint or sculpt or do something, and you take those creative activities away from children, and there is a price that is paid. But we talk about the importance of culture on this show all the time. We also talk about things like rites of passage, which are really important in terms of empowering young people to understand what their place in life is and what kinds of things should be important to them as they grow. Um, we have a lot of things to unpack, and I know Deirdre mentioned that she needed to step away at noon, but our partner Liz Morgans has asked a question, and I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to answer this question. I also have a question that was posed by Stephen E. Boyd, and I don't want that to get lost in our conversation. So I will say this: the radio broadcast will end at noon, and we will continue this conversation live on Facebook and YouTube via StreamYard. So we'll be able to answer those questions. Deirdre, I'm going to have you answer Liz's questions first because I know you got things that you got to do and you got to dip. And then we'll jump into the question that was asked by Steve. You might want to hang around a little bit, though, because I think you might be able to add some insight to that particular answer. And I know
if as long as I don't have to be on camera.
Well, we'll give you permission. We'll give you permission to block the camera so that we don't see what's happening in the rest of the house. Because I know you said you got to get things together.
I'm doing some cleaning. I got to get ready for company.
What's about happen? All right. Also, I want to acknowledge my broadcast partner, Antonio, because this is kind of an unusual show based on what we normally do. So I don't want y'all to think that, he's not included in our conversation. This is a very important conversation. And in a few weeks, we're actually going to reconvene and talk about some things that will actually shed some light on what's happening. I don't want to let the cat out the bag, so I'm going to zip it right here. But thank everybody for tuning in on AM 1490 WERE. This is 360 Info Network, and we are having a panel discussion about the state of arts here in Cleveland. We are live to Facebook and YouTube, so if you want to jump in, you can make comments. We'll do our best to put your comments on the screen and have you engaged in our conversation, a very important conversation. As always, we have to thank our engineer, Tone Harley. Tone is the reason that we are able to do what we do right now. And I am so grateful to him for his input, as well as the input that comes from the guests and the input that comes from the folks who are listening and watching. This is groundbreaking stuff, folks. I don't know that there's any other radio station in Cleveland other than the community radio station that serves us well, that we can have these kinds of conversations in front of a listening audience and in front of a viewing audience. With all that said, to those who are on the AM portion of this, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. Peace, everyone.
Peace.
All right. So with that, it is 12 o'clock noon, and we are live to Facebook and YouTube. We have with us Deidre McPherson. She is the Chief Community Officer for the Assembly for the Arts, doing great work in the realm of art and culture in Cleveland. We have Gwen Garth. She is the owner of Kings and Queens of Art. She has a great establishment down there on East 34th Street between Superior and St. Clair. I think it's 1385 East 34th Street. And she has a mobile art facility that she will be giving us some background on. We have Miss Gina Washington, a multi-talented, multifaceted artist here in Cleveland who is teaching in different places and also doing her art. You see what's behind her. She has a studio, gallery, workspace, and a place to lay her head down when she needs to catch some Z's. And we also have Ms. Robin Robinson, who is the executive director of Sankofa Fine Art Plus. She is an artist as well. I love her work. And matter of fact, Robin, I think I got something up over in your space over there.
You do.
Probably been there for a couple of years. Last but not least, we have Brother Hamtonio. Hamtonio is the creator of 360 Info Network. As we've said earlier in the broadcast, he is a police officer, but he is also a musician. He plays drums, African drums, and he is a comic sometimes as well. He's been in a few movies, so he's connected with the theater art. So all artists on this panel. And then I'm not going to forget about our good friend Deidre McPherson. Deidre is an artist. I'm just putting it out there. She takes pictures. She could play a violin. I don't know how long it's been since she played one, but she's a musician as well. So all of you are welcome to the call. I am going to see if I can't locate the questions, and I see that Deidre said that she would hang around for a second. So this is Liz's question. How could other organizations that support brown and black artists like Sankofa or Kings and Queens of Art also apply to be a pass-through organization to distribute individual funds to artists? She also asked, will there be an equitable, transparent way to share the love in other neighborhoods with other disciplines? How will pass through organizations be selected in 2025? So, keeping in mind the fact that there is something that we're not supposed to talk about today, Deidre, I invite you to answer the question.
Oh, I'm happy to answer the question, and just speak from as Deidre, and as Deidre at Assembly. So there hasn't been an application process for additional organizations, and for anyone who may not fully understand Liz's question, there are currently several granting partners that Assembly is working with, funded by Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. So they include Karamu House Spaces, Julio de Burgos Cultural Arts Center, Cleveland Public Theater, and then Assembly. We're all going to be managing and distributing or administering support for artist funding programs. These like we're constantly in transition, and so one of the things that we really need is a voice for artists, and Liz and many of the others, everyone on this panel is a really important voice and advocate for artists. And so when we're hearing feedback from you on ideas like this, how can others apply? We're keeping that in mind, and we want to have more discussion on these topics for future funding programs as we continue to grow the pie. So I'm not saying that that's off the table, but I'm also not in a position where I can promise that it can happen. But it's really important that we look at this topic. And I just wanted to say that the funding programs that you're going to see roll out this year, that are the result of the $500,000 that Assembly's been awarded from CAC to work with those organizations I mentioned, you're going to see an increase in the size of those funds. They're going to be larger awards, but all of those programs are for artists across Cuyahoga County. They are not limited. Like, the programs haven't been announced yet, so I encourage you to follow our website, join our email list, assemblycle.org, to stay abreast of all the things that are, the announcements that are made. But when you go to our website and you add the /SFA24, that's where you can learn specifically about this topic. You can hear the presentation that was given by Dr. Bria Heidelberg, who was our research partner when we did the listening sessions back in the fall. So I just encourage you to connect with us, connect with me, connect with us, and we'll keep you abreast. But each of those programs are not limited to a neighborhood. They are for artists who reside within Cuyahoga County, so anyone can apply, and more details to come.
All right.
And I'll add one more thing. We are in the process of creating an artist advisory committee so that we can proactively work with artists. And we have talks with artists all the time throughout the year, every day. And that's part of our role. But an advisory committee will be able to proactively work with us to directly influence and inform Assembly and CAC programs moving forward. So these things are underway and more to come.
Okay. Second question comes from Stephen E. Boyd. He says, how many working artists are there in Northeast Ohio? How does Cleveland, Cuyahoga County rank as an organizing arts delivery system of artists and organizations?
Mm-hmm. So I can share a little bit. Assembly, we do research, and our predecessor, Community Partnership for Arts and Culture, they've done a lot of research, but a research study we participated in that was national very recently, it was through Americans for the Arts. It was their, every 5 years, they do an Arts and Economic Impact and Prosperity Study, AEP6. This was the 6th iteration. Last year was the first time Cuyahoga County was ever represented in this national sphere. And we're, you know, the arts and culture has a you know, multi-billion-dollar impact, economic impact on Northeast Ohio. Um, and we ranked in another study 13th as far as, you know, the arts and culture being in, like, a thriving industry in our region. So I don't have a direct answer like how many artists, because some people don't define themselves as artists even though they are. But it's very, very robust, and it makes a huge impact on our economy.
I've heard it said that there's something like 30,000 artists in our community. I think I heard that figure come out somewhere within the past few weeks. But as you said, not everyone identifies as an artist, and some of us have to work full-time jobs and you know, be artists at the same time. So we're not really able to focus as much on our practice as we want to. But again, hopefully some of the initiatives that we are pushing for will enable folks to live full time as artists and not have to rely on other income. I know the plight of many musicians is that they have to have a teaching job or something like that, and then whatever they get from doing their performances is kind of like icing on top of the cake. But to go out there and make a full-time living as a musician is a very difficult situation. And then when you look at things like orchestras, I'll just use the Cleveland Orchestra for example. And this is part of the way that elitism kind of creeps into the artist landscape. People pay thousands of dollars to go to prestigious schools and get music degrees. So when they get that position in something like the Cleveland Orchestra, they don't just want to be there for a couple years, they want to be there for a career. So you've got people who are in those places who stay for 20 years, and then you have other musicians who would like to be a part of that and can't get in because that space is being by someone who could afford to do that. So then the other musicians are on the outside looking in and dealing with the scraps. So they're not going to make 60, $70,000 a year playing in the orchestra. They're going to make maybe, I don't know, I'm just throwing out an arbitrary figure, maybe $10,000 a year from their performances that augments the salary that they get on the job. Things definitely have to change. I want to come back to Gwen. Mention that Gwen has a new facility that she's going to be rolling out in the next few months. And so, Gwen, talk about this mobile art vehicle that you have, and talk about what you're doing at Kings and Queens of Art. Your mic is muted, Gwen. Okay, I think we
All
hear
right.
you.
Okay, thank you, Vince, for allowing me this space. So in April last year, I was given a grant by the Art for Justice Fund, and I was able to do to buy a bus and have it converted into a art gallery and classroom. It taken this project is teaching me patience, and so where I thought I was gonna run with it, I had to slow down a bit. And so in April, I plan on bringing it out, introducing it to the public, where we're going to teach art classes and adult literacy. The pandemic brought about the need to bring stuff to the people. So that's where I got the idea I had been working on for a while. And this is how Kings and Queens of Art will be going forward in the future is setting up a vacant lots next to libraries, et cetera, and just having events there. And I'm also going to do some programming with adult literacy and working with, we're also going to be focused more on returning artists and artists who are still incarcerated. That's a great focus of my organization. I was in the show that just closed down in December at the Schaumburg and in Hamilton, Ohio. And I want to start doing some of those things here in Northeast Ohio. And Vince and I are teaming up together. The third thing is we're teaming up together to celebrate Black History 24/7, 360. We've been talking about this a lot because we're not Black only in February. We are Black 365 days, 24 days, all, we're Black all the time. So these are the things that we're going to be working on this year. And I'm starting off by having monthly movie nights at the Art Palace, which is the name of my physical space. And as Vince said, is at 1385 East 34th Street. So the third Sunday of each month, around 5 o'clock, we will be showing movies and then having a discussion afterward. Last month we had Maxine's baby, the Tyler Perry story. So we want to start building that up. We want to make this a movement. Vince and I, for the last 4 5 years, have been doing Kuumba, and we need to spread that to keep it going. You know,
Yes.
yeah.
Mm.
And I'm in agreement with thank you, Antonio, about the us getting together as artists and forming a force, a movement. To
Mhm.
stand up for ourselves. Because just a few voices is not enough, and we just can't do it just one time. We got to keep this thing going.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, well, let me interject one thing. I'm gonna have to. I got an engagement too. I'm gonna have to go in a second. But you again. I was just gonna reiterate two things. That cultural collective. And let me take you briefly out of this space a little bit with the art piece. And I want to talk just briefly about us as people and why we keep getting the short end of the stick. It's a culture consciousness, it's a cultural unity that we keep finding ourselves in this space of, why not this? Why ain't they doing this and this? Garvey had talked to us a long time ago about getting our own and doing our own. Elijah Muhammad has talked about this, and this stuff is 100 years old, and we still in 2024 we hashing this. We have to get into the consciousness mindset of us as a people. I've been brought on panels and we talked about I hear people talk about the frustration that they're having with the government, the local government, some of our own Black folks that it seems to disregard the needs of our community all the time. And the only way these folks are able to still get that off is because of our cultural unity, our cultural collective unity. Because until we get that, we gonna find ourselves in these spaces having these conversations all the time until we have this collective. And that's the main issue to most of our issues. We can have, almost anything that we want. We got the dollars, we got the talent. Let's ask ourselves, what is the problem then? What is the problem? So, and I think we're coming out the gate wrong because we still have issues as a people identifying who we are, what's our background, where we come from, and so going forward, we're gonna have to do that. And then in reference to the cultural arts piece, that cultural collective, like what I'm trying to do with some of the organizations like African History Museum, Cultural Garden, Fred Ward's organization, Ridall organization, the Golden Ciphers with Pam Hubbard and all that. I'm trying to put them together as a collective, okay, to actually advocate for those particular funds on Juneteenth. How are we? Just bear with me another couple minutes, guys. How is it that when you're talking about Juneteenth, that you got somebody out of our culture, out of our ethnic background, putting on one of the largest Juneteenth programs downtown? Tell me, how is that possible? How are we sitting back and letting that happen? So it's the same thing as far as culturally and the cultural arts is concerned. A cultural a collective that is advocating, and out there for. And we as a community, if we support those things, we can't we won't constantly be disrespected by getting them dollars, because we are forced them folks to do that. Let's get to these Family Dollars and these Dollar Generals and stuff that's taking all our resources out of the community, and put some pressure on them as a community and as a people to give up some of them dollars so we can change the mindsets of these young folks and make them respect themselves and love themselves again. It's a shame that we allow them to come in and take our resources like this and don't get them to pay homage to the community. You got to pay the house man. Anywhere you go in any community, you got to pay the house man. And so that's a mindset of us as a people. So we're going to constantly have these conversations. And in closing, I'm putting this out to you guys who might have resources and to get your wheels turning on thinking. We're talking about having a parade again downtown.
Okay,
So we if some of your youth and some of the people, we're thinking about having some we're going to go to some of the schools, the charter schools, and try to get to their art programs and have them participate on the theme of Juneteenth, what Juneteenth means to me type of thing, and maybe reward some dollars to who come up with the best theme. So you guys to come out and march in the parade and have a table explaining what you guys do in the community and try to drum up support in reference to that. So I put that out to all of you guys. So that's my 2 cents.
All right. All right. Thank you, Antonio.
Okay.
Just want to talk for a few moments about specifically what the needs of artists are. And of course, we've already established that a lot of it is financial. We're looking, how can we get grant funds and so forth and so on. But aside from money, what are some of the needs that we can identify? I'll go to Gina first. Unmute your mic. We can't hear you, Gina. Still can't hear you. Okay, we're having a little difficulty with her audio. Robin, I'm going to ask you the same question and we'll get her audio fixed. Robin, you have to unmute. Yeah, we can't hear you either. What's going on?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, hear you now.
Okay. No, restate the question, Vince.
I was just trying to get an idea of what some of the needs of artists are. We've identified money as being one of those needs, but there are other needs that artists have. And we've talked about these through our support for our artist planning team process. But I just want to make sure that the general community knows that we need more than just money.
Yeah. Actually, we need a unity. And one of the things that Antonio was mentioning, which I completely agree with, however, part of our issue as artists and as people of color is that we segment ourselves. We'll organize in small batches, and then we don't communicate with each other once we've made things happen in those small batches. We as artists in Cleveland, as Black artists, artists of color, we need to organize ourselves. We need to let people, powers that be, decision makers know that, we are here, that we demand respect. And part of the issue, in addition to color, in addition to money, is the fact that opportunity, I mean, a lot of the opportunity that comes through the city or through different venues don't necessarily come as far as we are on the East Side, or we are as artists. We're not respected in our process, in our talents, in our ability to do what they expect other people to do. A lot of the funding comes, and I'm going back to money because money is an issue, but it's not the main issue. But a lot of it is grandfathered in. People that make decisions about art and artists have their favorites, and they don't actually come to arts organizations like Sankofa Fine Art Plus or Kings and Queens to promote their opportunities, and therefore we don't know about them until they're either already done or it's too late to apply. And those are things that we actually need to find out ahead of time, that we can actually do these things. And just the idea that we as artists are artists, we're creatives, we can do a multiple of things, and we're not all visual artists, we're not all painters, we have sculptors, we have musicians, we have all of, but we need to unify and stop segmenting ourselves and siloing ourselves into positions that we end up cannibalizing each other.
Mm.
Yes, there are some resources available through the CAC grants.org website. You can also go to Assembly for the Arts, and I think there's something called Creative Compass that makes announcements about grant programs. But I fully agree with what you're saying. As artists, sometimes we operate in silos, and it's just kind of a reflection of society in general. We tend to be cliquish or clannish or whatever, and people associate with like folk or whatever. And sometimes those groups can be small and they don't communicate with each other. So as you're saying, when we find out about an opportunity, sometimes you find about that grant opportunity and it's a great fit, but you found out about it 2 or 3 days before the deadline. So then you have to scramble to try to put something together. Whereas other folks who had more lead time could put more thought and more effort into their proposal, and then they get chosen. And then the other thing that you mentioned that really kind of resonates with me is how it seems like the same folks are always the ones that get grants, and then folks are sitting on the outside looking in saying, well, dag, what is so special about them that's not special about me that they end up getting the rewards and I'm always behind out? My journey along this whole idea of applying for grants was applying for several grants. I mean, more than 4 or 5, and you go through that process, and not only do you get turned down, but you don't get any feedback. You don't understand why, what's the deficit. And a lot of times it's not a reflection of your art, it's just a reflection of the biases that are involved in the process. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to start taking down some of these barriers. It's really interesting in how you've got these gatekeepers, and we always have to deal with the gatekeepers. And that's one of the reasons why the same folks continuously keep getting the awards and other folks don't. Gina, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
I just want to just agree with what you said. There's so many things that Antonio said too about our culture. Our culture keeps getting co-opted, and it keeps getting, other people commodify it, and we don't have control of those things. That's because the system is in place. It's keeping us in this plantation headset. Not only that, there's so many things that are keeping us separated as a people. We're not in a homogenous society, so we kind of fracture ourselves anyway, and we're operating in a headset of scarcity. So when you're doing that and you don't have that trust between one another, and that lack of trust has been, formed from hundreds of years, essentially, there are a lot of things that fall apart. There are a lot of things that we have to heal within ourselves as a people. And, there's been no reconciliation here in the United States. There's been nothing to that effect. So a lot of these issues that we're talking about are bigger than the arts. But the arts, like Robin said, are ways to heal, are ways to amplify that mechanism. So we can, maybe the arts are the ways to make this thing eventually disappear. I don't know. But,
operating in that scarcity hairset says, oh, I hear about this grant, I'm going to apply, and then maybe I'll tell somebody else later, right? Like one of the things I do, I get as much information as I possibly can. I give out as much information as I possibly can, because everybody needs to know, everybody needs to have access, everybody needs to like be able to bring forth their talent. So there's a lot to this issue that, you know, makes this a challenge. And there were other things I was going to say too when you guys are talking, and I've kind of forgotten what those things are. But if that helps, a little bit, you know, I have a group that I formed with working with Rainey Institute, coming in contact with the students from the School of the Arts, coming in contact with the students from Cleveland Institute of Art, and the teaching artists that are with us and whatnot, and that have come to us throughout the years, where I'm just giving them information. You know what I mean? Are you guys tapped into this? I just found out, you know, well, in talking to the Cleveland Institute of Art student in his senior year, I'm like, are you exhibiting? You know what I mean? Are your teachers talking about that? And no, he said, you know, I'm like, why is that? You know, why is the information not given to 18 and older? And like you said, Vince, you were talking about how they pick the select few, and those select few, because we have the gatekeepers, are the select few that are going to amplify either the problems, concerns, or whatever the agenda is of the gatekeepers, right? My art may not, you know, a lot of us artists don't necessarily want to be identified as Black artists. We want our art to be what it is. Why does that even have to be a category? I'm just saying there's so many different pieces to this. A lot of people don't necessarily want to identify as a female artist or whatever, because they want that art to speak for themselves. So where do we stand? You know, the big thing when it comes to diversity and equity training and whatever, it's like, how do you identify? And why do I have to? There's two opposite sides of the coin, essentially, that makes it a challenge. We're just a microcosm of the rest of the world, right? We're just a microcosm. Cleveland is.
Well,
And,
I want to point out something that I have observed from both you and Robin, and that's the fact that you're able to do things that give us opportunities to be the gatekeepers. But it's gatekeeping with an intention of collaboration and not exploitation.
intention. That's
Yeah.
the important
Yeah.
word.
Right. So when you, for instance, when you had the space over in Larchmere, and then you had a group show so people could come in and contribute their art. So those artists that have been marginalized and can't get in the major exhibition at the Cleveland Museum of Art or MoCA or whatever, at least there's somewhere where somebody can come in and see their art, and more importantly, purchase their art, because that's how they eat.
I agree. Yeah.
So we can look at what they ain't doing for us, but
we got
we can also look at what we're doing for ourselves. I have a piece over at Sankofa Fine Art Plus because Robin invited me to put something there, you know, so that provided opportunity. So these are some of the things that we can do for ourselves. You know, Robin, you mentioned the whole idea of us operating in silos. So coming back to that word intention, you know, we could say, well, hey, let's just have a gathering and invite some artists to come together, have some conversations about what's going on, but even more importantly, begin to talk about the things that we can do to address the issues.
Right.
You know, we can stand with our hands out waiting for somebody to put something in it all the time. And most people are going to walk by. Somebody might have some compassion for you, seeing you playing your saxophone out on the street and say, hey, you know, you sound good, drop a couple of dollars. You know, that's not necessarily going to pay your rent, but it might go towards buying a loaf of bread. You know, but we all got to do what we got to do. You wanted to add?
Yeah, I wanted to say, you know, you mentioned earlier when we were online that, you know, I have a gallery, but it's primarily online. It's called Matisse Gallery. And I'm just revamping that in my head. You know what I mean? Essentially, not necessarily in my head, but I'm revamping that online and whatnot. And for me, like the one thing we did as the one thing I did when I did Assembly for the Arts, one their leadership cohort, was to say to everybody in that leadership cohort, hey, let's have a gallery show. Let's all of us come together and do this. And we did that at the Kaiser Gallery, but in including with that show, I said we need to bring also someone along who doesn't have that voice, who hasn't had that voice, who hasn't had the opportunity. So, I brought my cousin along, Fallon Tripp, who's an amazing artist. She's just making stuff at home, tinkering. And I agree with you, Vince. We have to do those things. So, my headset said to me with Matisse Gallery, and I said to you guys earlier, I'm a weird anomaly, disenfranchised. I don't have a gallery representation. So I'm going to, let me represent those who don't have that representation. You know what I mean? Let me try to do things in that way. So the one thing that I want to roll out this year in making this thing happen, at the very least online, because I don't have a brick and mortar. We had a brick and mortar, but that was really hard. I really want to have more under my belt. So the one thing I want to do this year, or try to get into my place this year, is to commission an artist to do a piece specific for my gallery and pay them outright. Period. That living wage thing. I hate waiting to get paid when a job is done and
Yes.
I'm waiting for somebody else to do something. And with that said, I did a commission piece a couple of years ago. Won't say for whom. Love them, but I'm giving away all my liability, and the commission was only for like 500. So I would like to commission a piece from an artist that I love and respect, who doesn't have that all that going on out there. Just hold that liability for a year and give it back to them. I don't want to keep your liability for your art and you making money off of your art. I want us to amplify each other, artistically speaking. So that piece you create, and so far I've asked my daughter and my cousin to make art specifically for Matisse Gallery, and I'll amplify that as best I can 2024. Then after that, you do whatever you need to do to make money from that art, and hopefully marketing wise, that strategy will like keep the ball rolling, and we'll all kind of be sustainable through our art, and to continue that kind of cycle essentially. Because like I agree, there's no way we can do this alone, and there's no way we can do this without networking in any kind of way, and there's no way we can do this silently. And the bottom line, I like what you said earlier too, Robin, because you are an art therapist. I am not an art therapist technically, but all the art we do is therapy. So,
Right. Yes, it is.
and I have on January 26th a show I'll be doing, opening at the Fig. This is shameless self-promotion, but the thing about it is this: that show is a culmination of a workshop I did last year with the Cleveland Foundation's Arts Equity Grant, and the whole point of that show is called I Am. And the whole point of that show, well, the whole point of me creating that workshop was to eliminate bullying, and to at the very least have each individual love themselves enough, period, that all that noise on the outside won't affect you. And with that, the community hears what you have said about who you say you are. So the community owns that as well and should be there to protect you. Um, and that's what our cultural community needs. You know what I mean? We really truly need to love ourselves and respect that we have been so disenfranchised, fractured, and in this system that we don't have to participate in, this plantation system. Black and brown people need to really rebrand themselves so we can have that voice that other marginalized communities that have way less population than we do. I could go on about those communities, but a long story short, we gotta hold us together and bring others into our fold and continue to snowball this effect, so that love is there, that community is there, and that sharing is there, and that fear of you got it, I didn't get it, what, jealousy, whatever you want to call it, goes away. We can't go anywhere being stuck like that.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge the comments that Michael Gill has made just regarding the activities around galleries that are created and facilitated by people of color. And I'm going to add Larchmere Arts to that. You're going to be seeing more art at Larchmere Arts besides mine. But, part of the solution is us doing what we can for ourselves. So we can complain about being left out, or we can create our own spaces. And with both of you, we've seen that, and we're seeing more of that as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is something that you alluded to, and Robin also alluded to, and that is the role of artists in facilitating healing in our community.
Mm.
I don't think we really get enough credit for what we do. And, I mentioned public safety in the previous hour of our broadcast. I think we kind of default to that in terms of solutions that governments can provide for us. They can put more police people in our communities to make us feel safer. But the real issue is the fact that they show up to deal with something that has already happened.
Yeah.
And we have to get ahead of that. Being proactive means having an impact on the cultivation of our young people so that they grow up to be responsible and not prone to do the things that create the conflict and the controversy. The issue that young people are having today, and they've probably had it for a long time, but it just seems to be amplified, is that they're not seen and they're not heard.
Right.
Art gives them an opportunity to express what's here. It gives us an opportunity to connect with them and for them to connect with us. So we have to maximize our opportunities to connect generations and to have that communication through artistic means. And we also have to look at elevating the role of artists as being those who provide the solutions to the problems that we're dealing with. I will say this until I'm not here anymore. Put some meditation in the schools. Let those children get grounded for 5 or 10 minutes. You got 5 or 6 hours with them. Give them 5 or 10 minutes to just be with themselves, go within, put some Andre 3000 on. They know who it is.
Yep.
Put some art in the schools. Give them a chance to be creative. When you are creative, that is your connection with source, or whatever term you want to use for the creative intelligence and energy that exists in this universe. We have to maximize that. We know that the schools are basically just training programs for workers to work in factories. But the problem is the factories are in other countries right now, and there's no job for them to go to. The new employer is the internet. The new employer is AI. So teach young people how to leverage technology to their advantage, and they can create a living for themselves and not be subject to a $15 per hour wage that's not a living wage. It's just something that they can say that we gave you something. You gave us your time, we're giving you this money, be happy, even though you got to work 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. That's kind of where we are right now. So I love the term amplify. I think a couple of people use that today. And what I would like to see happen is that we amplify the cause of artists being the problem solvers and the healers in our community, and then give them the money to do what they need to do.
Right.
It's really that simple. We're going to wind down the broadcast. I just want to ask at this time, and Gina, you just mentioned what you're doing with your gallery. Is there anything else that you want folks to know about as we end the program?
Well, people can come out to Future Ink Graphics, where I'm going to do the culmination of the I Am workshop, and it's going to be an active exhibition. It's not like, hey, look at these pretty pictures on the wall. No, you're going to have to do some work. So it's like, I kind of want to bring the workshop to the actual space, and Robin participated in that workshop. So that opening is January 26th. I also want to amplify the fact that what I love what Gwen said about doing adult literacy, and I just heard or participated in a trauma informed teaching, and when I get the recording for that, Robin, I'll send it to you. And the fact that our community was 2 years behind anyway before the pandemic, so they're 4 years behind, you know educationally speaking. So there's a lot of work that we need to do to um, get the literacy rate up for everyone. And that's going to be a piece that we have to do with everything we do. And Vince, to add to what you said about meditation, Rainey Institute did social emotional learning workshops during their summer camp last year, specifically, right? And during those workshops, I straight up did, like, as much as I possibly could, at least 3 to 5 minute meditations with whomever I had. A great film came into the film festival last year about the community in Canada, how they transformed their community from violence to peace through meditation. It is very possible. And I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into that because I had to do that to survive the pandemic and every day. And I think everybody else can grow from that.
Yeah. Well, that was really one of the benefits of the pandemic.
Mhm.
Mother Nature put us in a position where we had to go inside because we couldn't go outside. So, go inside yourself,
Right.
visualize what you like to see in your future, and then that goes towards, manifesting it. So it really is a very powerful tool. Like I said,
Yeah.
Andre 3000 did something that was just revolutionary.
Hmm.
He didn't give you bars talking about this and that. He gave you something that would cause you to turn inside yourself and figure out who you are.
And go, whoa.
Yep. To discover that you are the great and mighty person that you are, you have to go inside because it ain't out there.
Right.
Robin, is there anything that you would like to plug before we close things out?
Actually, I want to applaud everybody that's been on this panel. Gina is right. I did her I Am workshop, and I recommend it for everyone to try to do her workshop. As far as Sankofa is concerned, we have for the last year we've been in a rebranding renaissance type of situation. And the pandemic was detrimental in a lot of ways to a lot of people. However, you're right, Vince, it did make us take account. We were running that treadmill, and it forced us to slow down and actually regroup. And 2024, Sankofa as an organization is doing that. We're regrouping. We are planning to bring the Black Art Expo back. That was our signature event from 2000 to 2011. And 2024, this year, we're planning to bring that back to Tri-C East Campus in November. So, if anybody wants to help with that, please get in touch with us. We're looking for volunteers. Fundraising and all that sort of thing is a big deal this year. But in addition to that, a lot of community work. Just trying to get the not just the youth, but the adults in the community. There's so much disparity emotionally that it's time to just, have people just sit down and use the other side of the brain, get creative. Stop, just take a minute to just do something with your hands and create something. Doesn't matter how it turns out. We're not trying to make masterpieces. We're just trying to get those emotions, get those experiences out of your system. And I think that's pretty much what we all need. We need to take a minute just to express ourselves and stop trying to accomplish things. Just do something without worrying about the outcome and the
Yeah.
productivity. Just do something creative. When they started taking cursive out of the curriculum for youth, I mean, that's that whole side of the brain. They're trying to dumb down, everybody. Creativity is something that is, everybody's born an artist. Everybody is born an artist. So let that art flow and just get back into the nature of your humanity.
Yeah.
That sounds like a t-shirt, Robin. Let that art flow.
You better do it.
You better do it. I just gave it to you. And I'm not even gonna ask for 10%. I'm not gonna be your agent or anything. I just planted the seed, reap the
Yeah.
benefits of it, and bless your brother every once in a while with a nice greeting. How about that? There were quite a few things that I wanted to touch on in the time that we were together, and I didn't really get to all of them. But one thing that I thought about as we were approaching this broadcast was just the difference between the east side and the west side when it comes to art, and what precipitated this idea was going to West 78th Street Studio a couple of Fridays ago
Mm.
and seeing what's happening over there. And you got this space with all these artists and all of their work up. And you want to talk about silos. I walked into one space, and I'm not going to mention who the artist was, but it was just basically an exhibition that had to do with domestic life, right?
Mm.
But I all these images all around the gallery, and there was not a single solitary black face in them. And it's just interesting how we can create a world that is exclusive and excludes part of what's here in this country. And it can be done in this city. I remember going to an exhibition at the Cleveland Museum of Art, and the title of it was Proofs. And it was proof sheets that were done by a number of photographers, all well-known photographers. None of the photographers were black. And then you literally had thousands and thousands of images from all of these contact sheets.
Yep.
And the only images of black people were Muhammad Ali, Jackie Joyner Kersey, and the hands of Miles Davis. And that was it. So
Music and sports.
yeah,
Right.
but
Amplify the stereotype.
yeah, but it's just that those were images from way back when. But then when you look at the art in this gallery, these are images that are relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an artist reflecting the reality of his environment. So if that's what he sees, that's what he sees. That's what he or she creates, and that's what it is. But I'm going around this tree just to paint the picture that you have this vibrant artistic community on the west side. You go down Detroit, you got Cleveland Public Theater, you got you got another theater institution down the street, you got 78th Street Galleries, all of that energy down there. And so you have municipal resources that are going in that direction. But then I look at this side of town, what do we have?
Well,
we got
they're trying to do the drill and twist building, twist and drill building. They're trying to make that an artist hub, right? They're trying to make that area an artist hub. But again, this is not in control of Black folks, right? We don't own a building like that. So we're not the master of ceremonies for a space like that. So I agree. It's a drastic difference between West Side, East Side. And that's like a whole nother show.
Yeah, it is. But it was something that I wanted to get to, and we didn't get to it.
Yeah.
So perhaps we can resume that conversation at another time. But, in spite of all of that, I'm just really encouraged. I think we have moved the needle. I think people are having a growing awareness of the importance of art and artists in our community. A couple of questions that I actually had written down that I didn't get to. One was, what is the impact of art on the community? I think we did deal with that. But then another idea that I had was how to do we define community? Because community means different things to different people. Another question that I had was, what are some of the obstacles to being effective in an art practice? And I think we did deal with some of those things. And one of them is funding. One of them is communication, finding out about opportunities and so forth and so on. And then we have the gatekeeping issues that we dealt with. So we got through that. And then another question that I had is art activism. And sitting in front of Gwen Garth and Gina Washington and Robin Robinson, I can definitively answer that question and say, yes, art is activism. And what we're doing as artists, it is having and making a difference in our community and having an impact. So it's all there. Robin and Gina, I want to thank you for joining us on the panel. I'm also going to give a shout out to Deidre and Gwen and co-host Hamtonio for joining us on this broadcast. I certainly hope that we were able to discuss some things that may have given you a better insight or idea of what's going on in our arts landscape here in Cleveland, Ohio, and to give you a sense of hope, because there are some things that are right around the corner that will be a bright light shining in our city. And we are very hopeful that it will even expand that light so that more artists can become involved and active, relevant, and contribute to the overall health, wealth, and success of Cleveland. So with that, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Vince, for having the show and inviting us on. I know Robin wants to thank you too, but she's lost her sound for a second.
Okay, yeah, it looks like her microphone is muted, and I can't unmute her because she's muted herself. So if you want to say goodbye, Robin, you got to unmute your microphone. If not, she's just around the corner from me. I mean, I could literally walk to her place. It would probably take me about 15 or 20 minutes to get there. She said she can't hear us, but that's okay. We're
all in the same area.
Yeah, we're all in the same area. We're gonna bring the Ville back.
No.
As a matter of fact, my grandiose idea is to make East 105 the equivalent of Detroit on the west side, and to have vibrant art and culture activity going up and down that street. I'm putting it out there. We'll see what happens.
I'm with you on that, and we can take that Rite Aid building and start right there.
There you go. You got space. It needs to be used. Thank you so much for joining. And as always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. Peace.
Peace.